Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ESS Finance Subcommittee meeting on September 12th of 2024. We'll start with the review of the summary of the subcommittee action, our minutes from our last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Any modifications? If not, I would take a motion for approval. They looked fine to me.
This is Geraldine. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Geraldine. Do I have a second?
This is Sherry. I'll second.
Thanks, Sherry. All in favor, say aye.
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 Sherry's aye.
I was waiting for the chat just to make sure. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, we'll go along next to the financial reports. First, we'll start with Lisa with the accounts receivable update.
Good morning, everyone. So if we start from the bottom here, all those $100 charges are for the upcoming deputies conference. A quick plug that if somebody has a county that is still interested in joining, let us know. We'll make it happen. Just send that on over to us. Looks like there's $10. Oh, from Dupaco, that was a failed payment. They've experienced some problems with some change in personnel there, and so they're struggling to balance that account. The $40,000 is for the Claris Fund 255 reimbursement, and the $2,000 from Cerro Gordo, that's in relationship to maintenance and conversion to Tyler, and that may go away. We're having some conversation with Tyler. And then from Blackhawk County, the $30.90 was a chargeback on their a point of sale problem. So we're working to contact the customer and get that resolved. And I'm ready to answer questions if anyone has some.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? I think it's pretty straightforward. And I do see in the chat pod that Amy did say aye as well. And Mel is calling in as well. So I just wanted to let everybody know. Okay, we'll move along. Samantha, do you want to start with our September summary of August ESS payments?
Sure. A few things highlighted here. We did get the data invoice for the maintenance fees for Boone and Mahaska counties for $2,283.50. And then Solutions did get us their invoice last month for $122,848.05. The CDNE Incorporated charge for $1,000 is related to the deputies conference. Desi Payne will be our speaker in a few weeks. And then we had a really good sale here at Hy-Vee. So we went ahead and got our pop, water, and some snacks last weekend for that conference. So that's just a reimbursement for my receipts to Hy-Vee. The credit card charges for last month were the pre-ab membership for 2024-2025 for $625, and then the annual conference registration for Phil and Lisa for $278. The Slack invoice here I have highlighted. We had a little bit of trouble getting that tax exempt for $837.81, but you will see that tax exempt reimbursement down below for $54.81. And then we purchased drinks, beverages for the last ESS coordinating meeting in August at Fairway for $34.75. Other than that, all the rest of the charges are normal charges that you see month to month. If there's no questions, I'd ask for your acceptance and approval of the payment reports for August.
Thanks, Samantha. Anyone have any questions? If not, I would take a motion.
Susan Smith, I'll motion.
Thanks, Susan. Do I have a second? Look like Amy second from the chat pod. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We'll move on to the Fund 255 invoices. With Samantha.
At Fund 255 reimbursement for August, is $44,116.94. Our payroll, as you can see, is higher than the reimbursement invoice, but because of the agreement that we have with the state treasurer's office, we bill for the income received in the prior month. I'd ask for your acceptance and approval of the Fund 255 reimbursement to the state treasurer's office.
Okay, any questions at all for Samantha? If not, I will go ahead and make the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
This
Susan
is Sherry,
Smith,
I
second.
second.
Okay, I've got Susan for a second. Thanks, Amy. Just a little, we'll let you get you next time. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye from Kelly and Amy in the chat pod. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll move on to the July 2024 financial reports with Samantha.
Okay, Bankers Trust, beginning balance was $1,315,484.76, with an ending balance of $1,167,279.84. We were successfully able to reconcile the account for July. We were also able to successfully reconcile the drawdown account. July profit and loss. Budgeted income was $147,185.53, with revolving income of $3,091,547.54. I do have the POS payment income highlighted here. Because of the timing at the end of July, we actually, it looks like we actually did, or sorry, at the end of June, it actually looks like we distributed more than we received, but it's just a timing issue and it'll bounce back next month. So expenses look like they're $20,000 more here in this month. We had our annual insurance expense for $37,205 hit in July. And then the point of sale transaction fees, this is actually for June, point of sale transaction fees. So this is for Bank Card USA and Professional Solutions. It is higher than we expected. We do have a meeting at 10:30 this morning with Professional Solutions to try to get this resolved. And then the negative $6,830.35 here is catching up from that overbilling from Light Edge. And then $160,647.45 is I believe Tyler and Fiddler's maintenance fees, with total budgeted expenses of $295,322.25. The reserve software license expense here is the CIS 1-year virtual machine software expense. And then the depreciation for the month of $26,991.16. With revolving expenses of $3,111,335.26, with a negative net income of $202,790.60. I did prepare a budgeted profit and loss for you. Budgeted income of $147,185.53. Again, you see the insurance expense here. The Light Edge. in the maintenance fees for a total budgeted expenses of $295,322.25 and a negative net income of $148,136.72. Balance sheet ending July 31st, 2024. Total assets equal total liabilities of $2,758,959.05. The credit card statement for July, beginning balance of $1,771.32. And the ending balance of $1,564.86. We were successfully able to reconcile the credit card account as well. Fund 255 reconciliation had a ending balance of $160,670.27 and total receipts of $44,116.94. And this does match the amount that we are billing to the state treasurer's office at the beginning of this month. Profit and loss for the Fund 255. And the balance sheet. I'd ask for your acceptance of approvals of the July 2024 financial statements.
Any questions for Samantha? Thank you for going through all of that. If not, I would take a motion for approval.
This is
This is
Geraldine. I'll
Sherry.
make that motion.
Thanks, Geraldine. Do I have a second?
Second. This is Sherry.
Bye. Sherry, okay, thanks. All in favor, say aye.
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 Amy and Kelly in the chat pod. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we'll move on with Phil. I'm sure wants to talk about this memo that he just sent to us and the next agenda item. Go ahead, Phil.
Sorry, I was on mute. And I need to share a document with you. Here we go. Bear with me. So what you should see is a copy of the memo that I just sent you. So the backstory of this is that we had a September surprise. In the previous meeting, we reported to you that we were going to be renewing our license agreement with the organization that provides the open source software, basically our operating system software. By the way, Kelly is with me and he can join in and explain, but let me just give the overview and then maybe he can give some additional detail. So as a part of the renewal, we, as we have typically done, work with a reseller. And that reseller is located here, and we've worked with them before, have not previously had any issues with them, and we went through the renewal process. As a part of that, it was sort of as a sidebar note, a question was raised not by the reseller, but by a representative of the parent company that there might be some discrepancy between the renewal approval and the actual license requirements. And so we had some sense that, well, there might be something that we need to reconcile at some point. And we went through a process, basically what they would refer to as an audit. Kelly and I were contacted by the parent company. They requested an opportunity to conduct an audit of our use of the software. The audit was performed and they produced the results to us. And the results of the audit showed that the way we were configured did not exactly, I may not be saying this exactly right, but did not conform to the license requirements. And the upshot of it is that we technically have been using more licenses, more capacity of their software than what we apparently have licensed for. From our point of view, we have been doing the same thing for years. It really hasn't changed much. And the biggest change has been recently when we switched from operating our own equipment and moving to the cloud. We did have to do some reconfiguration there. But otherwise, we basically have been doing the same thing for a long time. And we're relying upon our reseller to make sure that we were appropriately licensed. And from our point of view, it's just business as usual. Reseller gives us a quote. We approve the quote. We don't negotiate over it. And we did that. The audit showed that we had been underrepresenting our usage going back to 2015. So we're talking about 9 years. And one of the conclusions is that both Kelly and I agree to is that the audit is correct. It did not, our renewals did not reflect our actual usage. We were not aware of that. And we just do not dispute the facts. So the problem is that the parent company, in some manner, justifiably wants to be compensated for the use of their product based on the actual usage. The problem for us is we're talking about 9 years of activity that accumulated does not end up being a trivial amount. The other complicating factor is that the license agreement provides that if we do not conform to the license agreement, that is, if we use more than we pay for, that not only do we owe them for the base cost of the license, but we also owe them penalty and interest. And the penalty and interest ended up being, in round numbers, roughly twice what the license fee would have been. And so what is a real and substantive problem could be a really serious problem if they follow the letter of the agreement and charge us penalties and fees. So this all has happened in the last 2.5 weeks. So there's been no hiding the ball here. We've just been trying to get our bearings in terms of what should be done. So Kelly and I have to decide, how are we going to approach this? Is this something that we can dispute? If we fight it, can we win? And I think our conclusion was we just have to be honest and say we accept the fact that we did use it. we agree with the audit. And the prudent thing for us to do is just to be open, transparent, upfront about it with the company. So we did not wait around. After the audit was done and we knew what the results were, we initiated communication with the company and said, this is not something we did intentionally. We wish to resolve it as quickly as possible, and as amicably as possible. We met with the team from the company. We reviewed it. I won't say that we didn't have some emotion in our discussion with them. We did, but we kept it under control, I think. The emotion really boiled down to, why did it take you 9 years to have this conversation with us? And what was the reseller doing? We haven't been doing anything differently. We feel like we've been let down by our reseller by not helping us make sure we were licensed appropriately. That was part of our emotion. The other part of it was concern, I'll put it that way, that we're talking about an international company that has their software used all around the world and has deep pockets, much deeper pockets than we have. And the prospects of fighting the giant and winning, in my experience, are not that good. So our fundamental strategy was, let's own up to that we need to pay for what we used. And then assert politely that we don't think the penalties and interest should apply because you share in some responsibility that this was overlooked for so long, and some responsibility for your own reseller in terms of how they behave toward us. And so we proposed to them that we would pay for the license fees that were due, and we asked them to waive the penalties and interest. This is the discussion that just happened at the end of last week. And then earlier this week, we met with Stacy and with Julie, who were the two people that were available to converse with about this issue. And so the last couple of days, we've just been waiting for a response. And the response we were looking for was to accept our proposal and to waive the interest and penalties. I hadn't heard right up to 8:30. I hadn't received no response. I sent a very polite message to the company representative and said, what should I tell my finance subcommittee this morning? And the response I got was unofficially that they were proposing to accept our proposal and waive the interest and penalties. And they were awaiting for official approvals, and that they would provide us with the necessary documentation to essentially state that this fully resolves the issue and there are no remaining items to be resolved. And we would be licensed fully through the end of the current period, which would be June 30, 2025, which would then provide us with an alternative, or I should say, the opportunity to explore alternatives. And I say that because software has done what we wanted it to do for a lot of time, a long time. But this whole episode leaves a very bad taste in our mouth. And as a result of that, I would be favorable to identify alternative operating system software and to use this time to identify it and then make a transition. So I probably stole a bunch of thunder from Kelly, but that is the overview. And I would ask Kelly to jump in and share his perspective.
Yeah, sure. Start off with OS, it doesn't mean necessarily open source in this case. It does mean operating system. It's not open source software. It is closed source, which is what kind of put us in this position anyway. With Phil's explanation, I think the topic that needs to be addressed more thoroughly, that you probably have a question about, is, well, how did this actually occur? How could it go on for so long where this was a unnoticed issue, and we had this, what in essence is a a liability off the books that was accruing through all these years. And the story I told in our previous call was, this actually stems all the way back to 2009, 2010, when we rebooted the system. The decision to move off of 2 Sun Solaris boxes at the time, virtualization was coming into its own right at that time. And it seemed like a good technology to utilize moving forward for the project. So prior to me even being an employee here, but part of the consulting team to put it together, we said, this project should be virtualized. We'll put it on a virtualized platform. And at that time, I didn't necessarily have control over the licensing process. And we ended up utilizing this operating system to begin with. And my understanding, even as I became an employee in this project, was that we were on a physical license for our hardware. And if you can kind of picture, we had a 3-server stack that was virtualized at the time. So we used those 3 servers. You kind of pool all the resources together to create smaller little virtual servers within that. And all of those little smaller virtual servers use an operating system. In this case, our SUSE operating system that we're talking about today. So we had, and this is, I think, is a couple of important points about the path to where our thinking was throughout this entire term. We had more VMs than the licenses stated, than our licenses allowed. I am 99% positive from the get-go that we were not correctly licensed. And that was back to 2000, let's just even say 2010. The company in this review only went back to 2015. I don't know if they didn't have the data or what. So in essence, we're saving a little bit, because I am positive we had more at that time. And I'm positive because in 2012, which is an email that I had forwarded to Phil for review, and a reference should this go any deeper, we had communication. Orion, or Alliance at the time, who I think we got the licensing through originally, no longer worked with SUSE. So we had to go with a different reseller. Somehow we got hooked up. And this was the second thing I was going to correct you on, Phil, was the company that we've been working with is in New York. They have no connection to us. They don't know our business. They don't know anything really about us other than we license this software. So we got hooked up with them because they were a reseller. The email specifically states that I sent to Phil, it stated, we added a 4th server to our stack. We are running in a virtualized environment. Essentially, I think that means we need an additional license. Let us know, what we need. What they came back with was an additional license. So instead of 3, we had 4. And for the report that was provided to us from SUS when they did the audit, you could see in the spreadsheet where we had 4 throughout the years up until this year. And then we had our number of VMs that we were utilizing, and you could see it grow. And it wasn't an abusive growth from my perspective. You could see us grow by, 1, 2, 3 a year up until this last year, which I'll get to in a minute. Not abusive, not intentional, but for every 3 years going forward, nothing can change. We ran on a 4-server virtualized stack every year up until this last year. With that, we never really, I guess, gave it much thought as we renewed, because we said, what worked for us before is going to work for us again. This operating system is working just fine. Never had an issue with it. Let's continue, with this. We'd get the email that the license was up. We'd say, yeah, we're willing to renew. 3 more years, let's do it again. We never really had a need or purpose to go through and get a second opinion. All of our other licensing, by the way, that was done for the most part through Orion throughout that time period, very similar for the most part. And Phil can chime in on that, but it was typically provided to, we'd get a notice from Orion, say, hey, your VMware is coming up for renewal, your Cisco is coming up for renewal, etc. Okay, guys, what do we need, right? Give us the options. And usually they'd say, well, here's what you need to do. Here are the 1, 2, 3 year options. And we would select from that and go forward, giving them the pertinent information, right? That's also key. We never really did a whole lot of second guessing or double checking that work, I guess. So that's where the idea that we were correctly licensed, that was the genesis, and that was the thing that kind of reiterated the understanding that we're doing this right. We're on the up and up until this year. So let me talk about that for a second. So we did our migration this year. Doing that migration, I wasn't going to move production servers over into a new environment without there being some testing. All right. We had new firewalls. We had a new environment. We have a company that is working more closely with us than what they had in the past, because they actually are handling some of the operations in a sense. So the idea was we need to test this. I have to create clones or copies of some of our servers, and I'm going to push those over first before we do anything with production, because we need to make sure this works. We're trying to do this with minimal downtime. So that's what we did. We created copies. So in their report, you can see a jump in the number of our virtual machines. And they were created for that purpose. And also on the flip side, when we got moved over, we were going to, and have planned to, because we have restrictions on our use with LightEdge, we're going to remove those when we're done, which is something that I've been working on doing. So in the licensing for this year, when SUS came to us and said, well, it looks like you guys have been over for a while, we kind of had to say, okay, we can only really license the production stuff because that's really all we budgeted for. We're going to get rid of everything else. And the point here I want to make is, in this call, or in this email chain that we had the provider, for the reseller from New York. And in this case, the person that actually told us that we might be under licensed was an inside sales guy at SUS. He was privy to all the communication in this case, where we made the decision to license just 1 year of production and let the others go and not have them licensed. you would think that he might offer that you guys should probably license all of what you have because that's what we require as a company. Didn't say a word. Didn't say a word. That's frustrating. That they couldn't offer any shred of assistance in this case. So I feel like there was a little bit of gotcha, and this is just my gut feeling here. A lot of frustration there because then all of a sudden within two and a half, 3 weeks, we were turned around and we had this audit come our way. So rather than mentioning something to keep us on the up and up to assist us, it was, I feel like this was a bit of a game, but whatever it may be, you know, the audit per Phil's description, we worked to get that done ASAP, presented with the results, knowing that we were over. And I think the key thing that Phil said there too was, and I told him this beforehand, if you would have asked us in the renewal periods, and they came back to us with a correct quote every time, would we have renewed? We would have said yes. Please make room in the budget for this. We'd like to use this going forward. It is central to our operations. We've had no issues with it. It's been a good operating system. Let's continue. And the other thing about the audit was, yes, we did use those virtual machines. Yes, we did use those licenses. So we did need to take a, on the level approach with them through that process because we did use them. And I think it's fair that they get paid for what we use. I don't, and this is why Phil made the decision to offer them just the usage fees. I don't think it was legit either that we would pay the penalties or the fees because their resellers were not on the level with us, I don't feel, or they didn't do the due diligence that I think they should have been required to do. And in my opinion, neither was the inside salesperson, which is disappointing. Beyond that, a little bit about what the fees consist of, and maybe Phil was going to go into this. That $71,000, part of that represents the going forward fees for what we did not license. The decision we made a couple weeks ago, where we said, well, we've only budgeted this much. We can only license our production side. We can't license the rest. So roughly about $6,000 of that 71,000 is for going forward for this year. So that leaves about 65,000 or so, 66,000 that are back license fees. And the way I looked at it, even though the company didn't go back only to 2015, it should go back to 2010. So you really need to take that 66,000 and divide it by 14 years, which I think comes out to about that $4,700 a year in fees. And they did penalize us in the way it is described in their EULA, in all the legalese that they put in there. Instead of our discounted rate, they did essentially give us it's the list rate. So we didn't get a discount for that, which they put in their legal documents that's what'll happen if you don't get it licensed on time. So that inflated the cost a little bit of that back licensing. I'll stop there with the description. If there's any questions or anything that you have to ask or that I need to answer.
Thank you for correcting my errors, Shelley.
Yeah, it
We-
looks like Kelly asked, or Kelly has a long note in the chat. This sounds like a major budget issue we need to figure out. What is the cost going forward since they want paid for the extra license? I'm glad to see it will be at least paid through the year. Do you think we will have better luck with another company? How will it affect us to change? Unfortunately, it sounds like a big like a big company's problem, and they should have split the difference, in my opinion, to be fair. They were not transparent in the charges, and I agree they shouldn't have waited so many years. So I think, yeah, I would echo that, but we did use the service.
Yeah.
So I think it's warranted that we pay and just move forward. So does anyone else have any questions or?
I could also elaborate a little on the going forward. Yeah, when we found out that we were potentially out of compliance and the renewal cost, we immediately started down the road. I did work to identify a different OS provider and sent that to Phil just for his review. We even went down the road of getting an unofficial quote, which ended up being about half the cost. And there are benefits, and I sent a follow-up email yesterday. Again, Phil's in on that email, specifically inquiring about use restrictions and the flexibility of the licensing structure that they're under. Now that we're delving into all this, one of the good things about the company that we're looking at is they allow public use of their product without licensing any support. You only have to license support if you need it. Typically, what we've had to do due to compliance for PCI and or safeguards is license the production side because that's where we're running all of our production systems. We wouldn't necessarily have to do that with anything we have for our staging, QA, or development. SUSE doesn't operate that way. You have one production license in there. If you have another instance of this type of operating system in your system, you have to license all of them. So whether it was staging, QA, or development, they all needed to be licensed. So this is much more flexible, allows us to just do our production side. And then was there another question in there? Yeah, so the migration, in a sense, we've talked about that, and I've kind of already started to do some work on that. We do have an instance of the new operating system in our staging QA environment that I'm setting up. It's going to be work, and I can't say that it's not going to be insignificant, but it's going to take time. And that's something that we're going to have to get a start on and learn the ins and outs of the operating system. So the intent is, if this all works out, that we are off of SUSE by 7/1 of 2025.
Yeah. Kelly, do you think, so will we still go through a reseller? I mean, is that kind of?
Nope, done with that. Done.
Okay.
Done. Not
and, you know,
again, ever.
What he's saying is that Kelly is done working with resellers.
The
But
end. Yeah.
And that's what we verified with the new potential vendor was, can we buy directly from you? What is your audit process? Can we audit? We should be doing an audit every year, at least. Can we do that audit process? He gave us the tools or informed us how that can be done. Can you guys verify it for us? And yes, and yeah, never again.
Yeah. And you think about back in 2009, 2010, when this virtual concept was just coming up, it was probably, there weren't very many companies that offered it. And now as we move forward, how many years now, there's more competition, there's more, we have a little more leverage, or I don't know if you'd put it that way, but we can shop around a little more.
We could run, what gets in our way a little bit is we have compliance and regulations we have to follow, are supposed to follow, right? I mean, there's also legal risk in that regard, because we could run with an open source software if something happens with a hack, if something happens with, you know, a data leak somewhere, or something goes down and causes issues, you know, well, were you guys supported by, you know, a support license? You know, specifically IRS safeguards required that,
Right.
that
Yeah.
your hardware and your software, that it have a license and be supported,
Right.
so that you're getting updates, specifically security updates.
Mhm.
So if we didn't have that, we put ourselves at legal risk from another angle, which,
Right.
you know, take your pick.
Right.
So I want to add a couple of comments. I understand, and this is why partly why we're bringing it to the finance subcommittee. It's your purview to, you know, approve and give oversight to the things that we're doing, that particularly that costs money. And yes, this does, you know, require an expenditure that's going to put a further pinch, you know, on our flexibility. Now, it doesn't necessarily affect our actual budget. I think our, you know, the actual budgeted items are what they are. But this is going to add to something this year, a non-trivial substantive amount that we're going to have to pay for out of the reserve. Fortunately, we have reserves. And in my view, this, you know, does, you know, reduce our flexibility in dealing with other unforeseen events that may happen, but it doesn't necessarily affect our operations. It just means that we're going to have to dip into our reserves to cover this expense, and then take the appropriate steps to mitigate it and prevent it from happening again. So my recommendation is that if you choose to authorize us to make this payment to resolve the issue, is that we would draw it out of the software and equipment reserve. I don't know if maybe let me stop my share and ask Samantha to bring up the balance sheet again. So go to the balance sheet if you can, Samantha. So, you know, we have $365,912 in the software development and equipment maintenance reserve. We spent resources a year and a half ago to do updates to our search application and other internal operating systems, because we wanted to get off of the old legacy system and retire that. We're almost there, but we haven't entirely retired it, but we've made the big jump there, and we haven't been spending those reserves funds as quickly. We have spent some this year. We did plan just to renew certain software licenses out of the reserve this year, as we kind of tightened our belt um, and in some respects hope for an improving economy as we go forward. And then also we do have a funding proposal that we intend to present to the legislature this year. Generally speaking, you know, because activity has been down, our cash flow needs are down a little bit right now from a recording perspective. But I've sort of set as my benchmark of, if we've got 850,000 in the bank, then we should be able to cover our cash flow needs. And this amount is not going to take us below that. We're going to be where we need to be. If they had insisted on penalties and interest, that might be a different story.
Right.
But this is a manageable amount. It's not something we wanted to do, but it seems like the prudent thing to do. The other comment I want to make is, just to say it out loud, in a perfect world, maybe we should have done our own audit at some point. Maybe we should have paid closer attention to this issue. We're not the first organization to have a licensing company play gotcha. This does happen in the marketplace. And on the other hand, I have to tell you, as I've shared before, our technical team is stretched pretty thin right now, especially. And things do happen. And so you've worked with a reseller for a few years, no problems. Nobody's ever raised an issue. We think we're okay, and then it turns out not to be true. I can't say that we could have fully foreseen that.
No.
Could we do a better job going forward of paying attention to those details? Yes, we can. And I want to make sure you do not interpret what I'm saying as a criticism of Kelly, because Kelly does a great job for this system. And both of us were caught off guard with this. And if we want to put responsibility on it, I'm the buck stops here. So we have a very capable team, and unfortunately this happened. And so I'd be glad to answer more questions. The recommendation is simply to authorize us to remit this payment to resolve this matter.
Any other comments from the group? Questions?
This is
Sure.
Mel. Can you hear
Go ahead,
me?
Mel. Yep.
Okay. I just had one question in your email that you just sent today. So if I'm reading it correct, when you got the license renewal in July for that $7,875, that triggered you because it was a 1 year and that's normally a 3-year charge? Is
Their
that
pr-
what?
Their prices were going up, and we just didn't have it in the budget to pay for a 3-year license, and even out of the reserve. So Kelly and I were talking about migrating to a different system even before this happened, because their costs were going up.
Yeah, and that's also, in essence, that's kind of where I was talking about the renewal from this year. That's where they indicated it looked like we had been under licensed. And yes, that is a cost increase right there that you're seeing. But also that was kind of the inkling of, okay, well, if it's going to cost that much, we need to maybe start shopping. And two, that's where the decision was made, to say, well, we only have enough in there to based on their pricing, to license our production side. Let's go unlicensed, right? And this was put in the email because I replied with it. We're going to have to go unlicensed for our staging QA because we didn't budget for it. The inside sales rep was on this particular thread. And this is where I was kind of griping a little bit. No mention of saying, hey, you guys need to remain licensed, fully licensed. So unless you want to be out of compliance, you really need to buck up and pay for the, which would have been 16,000 or so for the next year. No mention of it. So that's where the difference, the prorated difference, is in that 71,000 that is a go forward amount. So you could almost say that we're paying that 15 or 16 right there, but part of that is tucked into the 71.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. Any other comments or questions? I think the only thing that when Julie and I had a call with Phil and Kelly that we would like to see, you know, when we remit payment, that there's some type of agreement or disclosure that we are paid in full. Something like that, that we agree that we will not be charged a late fee or something to that effect. That we're good until, you know, next June 30th of 2025. I think that's the only thing that I wanted to add from our previous conversation.
Yeah, and we have asked for that. They've indicated they will provide that.
Great.
I haven't seen it in writing yet, so
Yeah,
we have some work left to do.
right. So, okay. If there's no other comments or questions, I would ask for a motion to, for the payment to Seuss for $71,008.50. Do I
This
have a
is
motion?
Sherry.
Oh, hi, Sherry.
Hi, I'll move to approve.
Thanks, Sherry. Do I have a second?
This is Mel, I'll second.
Thanks, Geraldine.
Oh,
It's
I thought that
muted.
was Mel.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was Mel. I'm sorry. It was a little broken up here in Nevada. So, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Susan, Kelly, and Amy, aye in the chat pod. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Kelly, for joining us. We'll move on to the metrics with Phil.
So I've covered the agenda from this point forward. So this is the latest chart, shows the August submission activity. Unlike the previous month, which went down, we you know, are seeing things stay up a little bit. You know, the 255 income, as Samantha noted earlier, is actually now coming in at above budget. So we do have some good news that's happening out there, and so we'll hope for kind of some stability as we get into the end of the year. But so far so good. I think that's the last item in the regular packet. So I wanted to just give you an update on a few other things. And I'm going to take over sharing here and bring up a couple of additional points. Let's see if I can bring this up. So I'll just mention quickly that as Samantha pointed out earlier, we're going to be having a meeting with Professional Solutions to talk about the credit card and payment expenses. When we entered into the agreement with Professional Solutions, at that time, we provided them with all of the data about our transaction history. We shared with them the details of our previous arrangement and what our expenses were then, and they helped perform an analysis to show that the projected cost for the updated credit card system would be comparable or less. And so far, that has not turned out to be true. And we're a little disappointed with that. So part of the meeting today is just to see if we come to some resolution. There are some aspects of the fee structure that are very close to what we were doing before, but there are other aspects of it that were not previously disclosed or maybe were overlooked. And so we have to come to some resolution on this. We do not expect to make a lot of money from the point of sale system. We never went into it thinking this was going to be a big revenue source, but we can't lose money. Okay. And so to me, the essence of the conversation with them is they have to figure out how to reduce their expenses, or we may have to increase our surcharge if we can't figure it out. We're at 3% now. Credit card companies allow us to do 4. I don't want to do that, but we could do it. And the third option is maybe we have to go shopping again. Okay, which is not something I want to do because we got plenty going on. But they've done a good job for us in our online payment system. I have no issues there, but the point of sale system is not working as well as we want it to because we still are having issues with reports and distribution, and it's more expensive than we bargained for. So we'll see how the meeting goes, and I'll just leave it there for now. That we might be talking about this more at your next meeting. I could answer any questions if you had, but that's my assessment of the situation, and we're working on it. The other update I wanted to share with you was kind of where we were at with the fee policy proposal and where things were standing. We got a lot going on right now, and we're in very active communications with the stakeholders community. We have a working group with the Bar Association going on right now. We're in discussions behind the scenes with the lobbyists of the various groups and trying to make sure they're up to speed and they understand what's going on. We want to get as much settled before the legislative session as we can. And so that's what we're working on. Another aspect of this is outreach and advocacy. So we've identified key legislators that need to be communicated with. Even though we're in the midst of an election, we are going to be reaching out, and Census has been working to organize some briefing sessions with 5 or 6 small groups of recorders who happen to be represented by some of the key legislators. And we're going to make sure they know what the FAQ says, what the talking points are. We're going to facilitate communications, help them facilitate communications with those key legislators. So that is in process. Now that the association and ESS have formally approved the fee policy plan, now we got to communicate with people. So part of that is communicating with your fellow office holders, including your boards of supervisors. So what I've got on screen right now is a draft that is nearly final that will include a cover memo. It will include a copy of the flyer that you have previously seen, and it will include a spreadsheet that shows the projected new income for county general fund budgets if the proposal is approved. And we're showing them a range depending on how many average pages you might record in a year. And we're comparing that. We're being upfront. We're comparing it as noted here. We're comparing this to calendar year 2023. When we get to January, we'll redo all this data and then do a comparison to 24 and project to 25. But this is where we are at in terms of communication. And we will send a note out to all the recorders to say, hey, we're sending this message to your supervisors. Be aware of it. Be prepared to talk to them about it. Use your talking points and help communicate it, because we need the supervisors to support this with your legislators as well. Then we're working, just to be clear, we're working through ISAC to get this distributed. So Census will be working with Lucas Beankin at ISAC. to get this message delivered. So that is in play. Another thing that is in play is something I'll share with you, and that is we shared this with the full ESS committee at their recent meeting, and what we're working on is what would the legislation look like to um, implement the new fee. Okay, and in order to do this, we've got to amend section 331.604, and this is what it looks like generally. So the introduction to 331.604 would state that the recording fee is $10 instead of $5. By omission, the additional transaction fee goes away. Okay. Then the next section speaks to the allocation of the $2 from the base recording fee for what we now refer to as a Recorder's Technology Advancement Fund. By the time we get to January, we might be calling it something else, but that's what we're calling it right now. And then this is where your records management, your preservation, your digitization activity, all of that would be covered. And then we have added in the language about education and training. Okay, so that's where that is right now. Then we're basically mirroring current law in terms of what happens with those monies when they're allocated. And instead of saying the county treasurer shall establish those funds, we're just leaving that responsibility with the recorder's office. And this was a recommendation that came out of the last ESS committee meeting. So this is coming from recorders, and we've made that modification in the language. And then the next section relates to the electronic services system. So the allocation for ESS is coming out in this section as well. And then the rest of it is section law, basically to say, okay, if you had so much money in this fund and we created this new fund, you have to transfer that money over from the old fund to the new fund. Pretty straightforward stuff. We are vetting this draft with the state treasurer's office, particularly with respect to the ESS portion, because today law requires that counties distribute the funds to the state treasurer's office, and then we drive down from that. We're talking to the treasurer's office. We don't want them to be surprised. We're saying, hey, we've been doing this for 20 years almost. Do you want to keep doing it the same, or would you be open to doing something differently? And that's a conversation we're having with them right now. So when we kind of get an answer to that, then we will finalize a draft, as you see here, and then get it circulated more broadly. But right now, we want to make sure we are in good standing with the state treasurer's office before, and make sure they're fully informed before we do anything else. So that is in play. So you have language relating to the fee policy itself. You have language relating to changes in document formatting, which are in flux right now because we're talking to the stakeholder groups about it. We will have language in play relating to some of the special projects that we have talked about as a part of the modernization initiative. And all of those are intended to come together in one piece of legislation. So that's where we stand right now. We're coordinating with Stacy and Megan and with Nancy and Lisa, everybody, trying to make sure everybody's informed as we go forward. But the work on this is happening not just behind the scenes, but lots of discussion with stakeholders. and the conversations with legislators are just beginning. And so far, I would just say, nobody said no, okay? And I think we have demonstrated openness, transparency, engagement, invitation to offer comment, make edits, changes, amendments, all with the idea that if it's humanly possible, to go into the 2025 session with some consensus that, hey, did you meet your 3 objectives? Is the fee increase meaningful? Is it reasonable? Are there going to be benefits? Those are our 3 objectives, right? And we got the added benefit of simplification of the fees as a benefit, as a part of it. And, you know, there are no guarantees with the legislature. We aren't sure what we're going to get after the election, but we're doing everything that we can. The team, your volunteer leadership, everybody's working together on this. And to the extent that you can say things are going well, I would say they're going well. Nothing bad has happened on this front. So we'll keep going and keep you posted. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, but that's the short update of where fee policy and modernization is. Stacy, did I miss anything
No,
important?
Mel has a comment. She'd asked, can a copy of the message go to the county recorder? So the one to the Board of Supervisors, I think she's talking about.
Yes,
when-
absolutely. So
So
the
when
ins-
they ask, yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
absolutely. So the intent is, we're still finalizing this with Lisa and Nancy right now. And we still have to, you know, run it through ISAC to make sure
Mhm.
everything's kosher there. But yes, as soon as this is the final thing, we will distribute it to all recorders so that you can see what the message is as it's going out.
What I was thinking of, Phil, is that, you know, most recorders have quarterly reports and some talk to their boards at that time. So then the end of September will be a quarterly report to present, you know, in October. So do you think that timeline, like the first or second week in October, we would have that memo?
You're going to have it next week.
Oh, awesome. So maybe that's it.
Our intent is to get this out next week.
Okay.
And so as soon as we know it's in the pipeline to go to supervisors, because it takes ISAC a day or 2 to, you know, to do that, then you'll probably get an email from Lisa that says, hey, here it is.
Awesome.
And then off we go. So yeah, you definitely can, for any end of month reports, it'll be there on time for that. And we encourage that. That we sent out recently, at least to your leadership group, Stacy, a slightly updated version of the talking points. So that is there. The
Mhm.
flyer is still the same. That hasn't changed in the last few weeks. We did some updates after we received some comments from Nancy about discussions that the executive board had. So we made some changes after that.
Mhm.
But since that time, it's been fairly stable. And so, the latest versions of that will be in what we distribute to everybody. So you'll have the latest version of the flyer also.
Great.
So
That's
good
great.
luck. Go get them, everybody.
Yeah. What do you guys think? To the rest of the group, the recorders, do you think that would be a good time for everybody to get on an agenda? And, you know, you can even bring up the annual report and the great article that Kristen just had in the ISAC magazine about us and ILR and ESS. So I don't know. You guys have any other comments?
I do think that would be a great time. I've talked to my board several times about this already, and I mean, they always ask, how's it going? You know, what are you
Mhm.
doing with it? So I think that would be a great time to give the information to them and then be able to explain it a little bit better to them.
Awesome. Thanks,
I
Jen.
agree.
Great.
Geraldine, it's Lisa. Do you feel like they're favorable to this?
They are very favorable. Yes.
Because county budget income, et cetera.
Yes, yes, they are very favorable and they keep, giving me ideas about, oh, this is the legislator you need to talk to, to get this done. And I say we have very capable people who are heading this up that know what to do there, but yes, they are very favorable.
Yeah, and
That's
Sherry,
terrific.
Sherry also commented that, sounds good. I spoke to my board about it a couple weeks ago and the newspaper put a blurb in also, so that's great. Susan said she started talking and yes, everyone is favorable, and Kristen said thanks for me talking about the ISAC letter. Amy, I also agree this would be a good timing to visit with our boards. Great. That's awesome.
And I've just visited personally with mine, not actually in front of the board, but I will
Mhm.
when we have this.
Awesome. That's great. Any other comments for the good of the group today? Phil and Kelly, thank you. Seriously, thank you for all your due diligence on the surprise 71,000. We appreciate everything you guys do. Just know that. So, anybody else? Phil, I interrupted you. I'm very sorry.
No, you didn't. I'm just gonna say thank you, and if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or other members of the team. But we do have a lot going on right now, so all the support you guys can provide is really appreciated.
Okay, with that being said, our next meeting is October 10th at 9 o'clock. So have a good day and a good week, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.